Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the summit. I'm Alexis Moore, and I'm here with Ingrid Fattel Lee. So I'm so looking forward to this conversation today with Ingrid. She is a designer and author whose groundbreaking work reveals the hidden influence of our surroundings on our emotions and well-being. As the author of Joyful, The Surprising Power of Ordinary Things to Create Extraordinary Happiness, a former design director at global innovation firm IDEO, and founder of the website The Aesthetics of Joy, which is beautiful, might I add, she has devoted her career to helping people find more joy in life and work through design. Her immensely popular TED Talk, Where Joy Hides and How to Find It, has been viewed more than 15 million times. She has over a decade of experience in design and branding. So welcome, Ingrid. So wonderful to be here with you. Really looking forward to this. I love this topic so much.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be with you.
Thank you. And so today, our theme, and we'll see how it unfolds, our theme is simplicity and earth-friendly living, creating more harmony in your life. So just to get us started, could you share with us what inspired you to explore the connection between our surroundings and our experience of joy?
Yeah, it really began as kind of an accident, an offhand comment while I was in design school. I was studying industrial design, and a professor at a review made an offhand comment. He said, "Your work gives me a feeling of joy." And I thought, well, that's weird, because I always thought of joy as this very ephemeral thing, right? It's not something that we can see or touch. It's not something that comes from stuff. We're always told money doesn't buy happiness, money doesn't buy joy. So how do tangible things create this intangible feeling of joy? And so I was asking the professors on this panel who were reviewing my work, and they couldn't answer that question. And I went to the library and looked for books, and there was nothing there that really explained from a scientific perspective, how do our surroundings influence our joy and our well-being? And so I spent 10 years doing research to fill that gap.
Wow, beautiful. And so it makes me curious. Your designs, did they bring you joy? So the professors looked and they said, this I'm feeling of joy. I'm curious what your experience was.
It's so funny because when I went to design school, I thought, I want to make sustainable things. I want to make ergonomic things. I was very serious, and I really was not thinking about joy. Joy was such an afterthought for me. For me, it was about, doing something. It was the height of eco design. It was the mid 2000s. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to create things that are going to make a difference in the world. And I really wasn't thinking about as much about how they looked or how they felt. But I think something must have gotten in there, and they felt that. I just didn't know how does that happen?
How does that happen? Yeah, that strikes me as like an interesting question to want to answer. I think when I was listening to your talk before this, I was thinking like, oh, I mean, I don't know. It just seems kind of unexplainable. It's just like a feeling that you get. So yeah, I guess, what made you want to know the how? Like, why was that important to you? What was important about
Well,
the how to you?
as a designer, if we can design things that create more joy, then there are lots of things that result from that, right? Like if we have environments that help us feel our best from a mental health perspective, we can use that in spaces where people work, spaces where people live. We can use it in a lot of our public spaces to promote positive feelings. So if we can understand what are the secrets to designing joy, for me as a designer, I thought, well, actually, that's pretty powerful. And so that's what really helped me change my focus and say, joy, I don't care about joy, to actually, joy might be really powerful. And, once
Oh,
I got into that research, I started to realize that though we think of joy as this very, transient emotion, in fact,
Hmm.
it has a lot of deeper effects on our well-being. So there's research to show that joy decreases inflammation in the body, that it boosts our immune system, that it helps us recover from the cardiovascular effects of stress. So things like our cortisol level, our blood pressure, our heart rate all come down more quickly after a stressful event if we have a brief experience of joy. So these little moments of joy that we might encounter in our surroundings can have bigger effects. They have effects on our productivity. We're 12% more productive when we're in a state of joy, according to some research. They influence our creativity, our relationships. So there are many different ways that just embedding a little bit more joy in our surroundings actually influence our lives on a profound level.
Okay, and now I'm starting to get it more because it's like, okay, it's like when we know this, and you just stated these direct positive impacts on us, then it starts to kind of it starts to incline the thinking towards like, oh yeah, this is like a really good thing for me to do. Um, and and there's something that like struck me too. I can't remember where I saw it. Perhaps it was on your website, but it's just something about like, okay, maybe we don't need to make some big like drastic change in our life. Like I don't need to like change my job. What if I just started with changing like my office environment? And see what happens from there. So, can you talk a little bit about that and what you've seen when people make a seemingly small change like that that doesn't maybe seem connected to like their happiness with their career or something?
Right. So I think that is one of my biggest takeaways from this work is that
Mm.
small changes can have really surprisingly big effects. And they do this because, when we add a little bit of joy to our environments, we are changing the space that we interact with every day. So as we, this isn't just, one moment of joy, we get to experience this over and over and over again. So, for example, one of my favorite examples is my student Jennifer, who redesigned her living room. And her living room, when she started, was this kind of pass through space. And the effect of that was that no one spent time together in her family when they were at home because they all spent their time in their bedrooms. And maybe you've experienced this in certain houses, everyone ends up in their bedrooms because there's no inviting common space to be together. And so one of the things that I do with students is I ask, what are the moments that matter in your home or in your daily life? What are the experiences that are really important to you? And for Jennifer, this was being together as a family and playing games and reading books together, but just being in that shared space. And so she redesigned the space. She did not renovate. She didn't pull up her floorboards. She didn't even paint her walls. She added a rug. She added art on the walls, some plants, some better lighting. And after she made those changes, now her family spends time in that room all together. So it's a dream that she had, a way that she wanted her life to be, that she
Mm.
felt would bring her joy. And then it came to life simply by making an inviting space where people wanted to be. So that's one example, but I've also seen, for example, another of my students, she was really burned out and her home office just made her feel overwhelmed and depressed. And so it was, it's chicken and egg, right? I'm burned out at work, and then my office is stressing me out, and then I'm more burned out, and then right. And so, but one of the things that I think was really profound about this story is that she was really at the point of depression because she felt like she was letting her family down. She felt like she
Mm.
couldn't be, present for her family. She'd go into her office and feel totally overwhelmed, too overwhelmed to plan fun activities with her family. And so she really felt like she wasn't measuring up at work and wasn't measuring up at home. And so she decided to reimagine her office to be kind of a more tranquil oasis. She cleared out a lot of clutter, and not just cleared out clutter, but she moved the table to the center of the room so that it could be a space where when her kids got home, they would come and read in there with her. So she wasn't always alone in there with the door shut. She did something very clever where she and her husband removed a panel from the door and changed it to glass so that when her kids come home, they can peer in or leave little notes up against the door. So there are lots of ways that just adding a joyful feeling to a space then change, afterwards she said, I feel so much more connected to my family. I feel so much more able to go in and be peaceful and productive. So the effects can really ripple out. And it's not to say that a job can't still be stressful, but
Sure.
you have better resources to deal with it.
Wow, better resources to deal with it. Yeah, and that is like a through line that's been coming up in a lot of conversations. It's like, okay, how can we, like, there's going to be the ups and downs of life, and there's a lot going on in the world and in people's individual lives that it's very difficult. But there are these aspects where we can like resource ourselves, and what I hear is bringing in these moments of joy is can be a part of that, so that, yeah, there's more on this side of kind of creating a resilience with like the connection with family, and so you're not as much in isolation, and um the space is there's less clutter around, so the mind is more calm, and then so it's like you can go and deal with what's stressful from a place that's not totally depleted. It's like a little bit more full.
Absolutely. And I think that, space is a resource, right, that we can use. And it's a really powerful one because, again, you interact with it all the time. So I often say that space, your home isn't just a roof over your head, it is the foundation of your well being. Because any changes you make in your space help guide your behavior, they help shape how you feel in an unconscious way.
Wow. They help shape how you feel and guide your behavior. That's fascinating. Can you say a little bit more about guiding the behavior? I think that in this past example, it's like the family members, they were joining in and reading and these other things. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect?
Sure, absolutely. So there's research that shows that when people are working in more colorful workspace, they're more alert, confident, and friendly than people working in drab spaces. This is a big cross-cultural study that includes countries as diverse as Sweden, Saudi Arabia, and Argentina. So we're talking about very diverse countries, but people feel more alert. They feel friendlier. So if you were to, if this is just your workspace influencing you, but it changes how you interact with people because you're more open and you're more friendly, then that changes how people will interact back with you. There's also research to show that having plants or nature in your environment help restore your attention and your ability to concentrate. So this is extremely powerful because if you have a tendency to just get depleted as the day goes on, just adding plants to your space can help restore your ability to focus and concentrate. That can change the whole course of your workday. There's also research to show that when people are in what they call lean work environments, which is like a classic cubicle, right? That people are, and then they give people the opportunity to be in what they call enriched work environments, which have plants and art and things, that people are 15% more productive in those enriched workspaces. So again, this is very unconscious. This isn't, you're going and you're saying, oh, I feel good here. Now I'm going to work so well, right? It's that
Right.
you are in a space that makes you feel good, that makes you feel secure, that makes you paradoxically, even though it has more stimulation, actually helps you focus. And that changes how you interact moment to moment with your work, with your own creativity, with the people around you. So it's very subtle, but making these changes can have surprising effect.
So beautiful too, because like this is a kind of change that actually maybe a little different than some of the other processes of of change that we can think about. It's like, okay, if I'm going to therapy, I'm gonna be getting into some hard stuff. I'm gonna be working through some stuff and things. And so with this though, it's kind of like the whole process is joyful. It's like the whole process gets to be kind of fun, where it's like you get to think about oh, what would I like? What would be helpful? And I mean, maybe maybe it's not always fun to like put up a shelf. So there can be things that pop up that are frustrating, but like generally, I think of a kind of fun process.
It is. It is a fun process. I mean, I think that too often we think of self help, well being as discipline, hard work,
Mm,
show up every day, push through obstacles.
right.
This is follow your senses, learn what feels good, allow yourself to follow what feels good, create a space where you feel grounded and light and easy, and allow that spirit to flow into the other things that you're doing.
Whoa. Okay. And so, for someone who's wanting to get started with this, where do you recommend people start to begin making some small changes to their environment to create more harmony and grounding?
Well, I think that the first thing is color. Color is an easy one to start with because so many of us, after 20 years of minimalism and the kinfolk era, are often living in spaces that have less color in them. And so adding little pops of color can be a way to bring that back in. I think a lot of us, after so much time, are a little bit chromophobic, right? We're a little worried about bringing color in because we're afraid we're going to make the wrong decision. So I think just starting to bring in little pops of color, maybe
Mhm.
even just a colorful coffee mug on your desk, or I love to get colorful consumables. So like the candles you burn on your table, they don't have to be white, right? Picking colors so that you're bringing color to your table, your linens, things like that. Those are easy ways to start bringing color and vibrancy into your space. Another one is light. I think, obviously, if you have natural light, being able to let in more natural light. But if natural light isn't what you have, artificial light can be really helpful as well. But brightening a space instantly lifts the mood and the energy in the space. So even just adding an extra lamp can be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, just I'll share like a little personal experience. I mean, maybe folks watching from past summits to this one, I have different colors here in my space. So and I painted over the summer, and it had just I redid some things in my space, and it just made such a huge difference for me because prior to that, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to need to move in order to do, in my new place. That's where I'll do the whole deal of redesigning and having things in the spaces I want, and and being able to do it here and now. I mean, it has completely changed. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm totally happy here. Where before I was a little more fixated, on something in
Mm-hmm.
the future.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a common thing I hear, right? Oh, I'll do this in the next place, or I can't do it now because I'm renting, or I'll do it when I get through this big presentation. There are all sorts of reasons that we put off decorating. I put off decorating for a very long time because of infertility, because I was going through infertility and I felt like I didn't want to decorate my bedroom because I knew that we were either going to have to move or renovate when I got pregnant, and I didn't want to waste the effort. Well, it was 4 years. And so for 4 years, I was waiting and saying, oh, I think, we can put conditions on it, but the reality is that your life is happening now. And when you commit to your space, it's, I don't know if it sends a signal to the universe, but it certainly sends a signal to your unconscious
Yeah.
that you are living your real life as opposed
Mhm.
to, I'm waiting for my life to begin. And the other thing I think that it does, I've seen with my students again and again, is it gives you a real sense of confidence to see your identity reflected in your surroundings. This is not something, I have lots of research on color and plants and all of these specific aesthetics, but the intangible piece is seeing yourself in your space and recognizing, wow, I look at this space and I see the art I love, and I see the, the colors I love, and I feel just a very subtle reinforcement of who I am as a person. And that's something that you can take with you into, anything else that you do as you move through the world. You have this foundation that is a solid foundation grounded in who you really are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's such an immediate impact with the change in your space too. It's not this delayed kind of like, okay, again, over time. I know that change takes time. It's such an immediate reinforcement of a
Right.
change, and then it's also like another thing that makes me feel good, which is an intangible, is that I it like signals to me like, wow, I really cared about myself enough to make this change. Like it was
Huge.
all from love, you know? It's like,
Yes.
yes, I'm the main one in here.
Yes.
And I cared that I have a really nice environment to be in. And that really
Yeah.
does something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a great observation, right? That having a space that you have designed for yourself, it is a kind of self-care, right? To say, I'm worthy of having a space that feels good.
Right. Right. And also to your point too of like this, you mentioned like the 4 years journey that you went through where you delayed making the change. And I shared, I mean, I'm going to be in this place for 5 years. So, you know, um, and I do rent, and it's like I did paint, and I can say that having done so, oh, it's completely worth it for me to paint this place white again before I move. It's not going to be. There's so many. It's a daily experience that I get joy from. Rather, and yes, I'll need to paint, which will take maybe 2 days whenever I do leave. It is totally fine. It's completely worth it.
Right. I mean, putting more of yourself, putting more joy into your space can be an investment. But I think once you experience what that investment does, the rewards are so profound that it really does turn out to be worth it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's keep talking about some of these accessible changes that folks can make, and you touched on them. So, um, yeah, for those especially on a limited budget and resources, what are some elements they can change? What are a few accessible things for them?
So we talked about color, we
Yeah.
talked about light. I mentioned plants, another one that's very easy and accessible. You can take them with you. It's not an issue if you're renting. Another one that I think is really helpful is adding curves to your space. So we
Mm,
live in these sort of rectangular boxes. We have all sorts of hard angles around us, but if you look in nature, you notice that nature is full of curves. Um, and curves are some of the most joyful shapes. And there's really interesting neuroscience to back this up. Researchers have put people into fMRI machines and shown them pictures of angular objects and round ones. And what they find is that when people look at angular objects, a part of their brains associated with fear and anxiety called the amygdala lights up. When we look at curves, that part of the brain stays silent. So something happens when we look at angles, probably because we evolved in an environment where sharp angles could be dangerous to us. So we have gained over many, many thousands of generations of evolution this unconscious sense of caution around sharp edges, which we don't have around curves. So curves naturally set us at ease. And so I think that you can see children, all of the things at the playground, the toys they play with have these rounded edges, these bubbly shapes, squiggles and waves and scallops. So all of those shapes tend to be very joyful, and they're a wonderful way to bring a sense of joy and whimsy into a space, especially if you're worried about color and being too much, right? You can bring in a ball shaped lamp. You can bring in curved art, a round rug, curved shapes on a pattern on your sofa. There's so many different ways to bring those in. A round coffee table. All of those things can create this sense of joy and lightness in a space. So I love curves. Another one is bringing in, we talked about harmony, and there are lots of ways to bring in a sense of harmony to a space that aren't just decluttering. Bringing a sense of order to a space, of visible order. So like color coding your books is one that I love. I know color coding books can be controversial if you're someone who likes to have them alphabetical by author, but having them color coded to me is such a joyful way to work with what you have in your space and create a sense of both vibrancy and also order. You can also do this through patterns by bringing in repeating patterns, stripes or checks or any kind of pattern that repeats, brings in that sense of harmony, creates that sense of baseline order for the brain.
I'm also thinking about how can people get inspired towards the change that they want to make. Okay, and the reason I'm thinking this question, I just have to say it. It's because I have one decorative pillow that I've had for years. So this is my decorative pillow, and I've always really loved this pillow, and I just got it at Target.
Yeah,
and I just loved the color scheme, and then I just thought, how could this color scheme be like represented more in my space? And then that's what actually inspired me to choose the colors for painting that I did, was because I saw how this went nicely together. And I actually painted my other wall with this turquoise. And I got this bedspread that's this salmon color.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I'm wondering, like, that managed to happen organically, but maybe for someone who's like, man, I really want to change, it's kind of blank in here, like where can they start to maybe get a little inspiration about what would feel good, because maybe they don't know what would feel good for them?
Yes, I think that's a great question. So number one, I think art or a pillow like that or something that you were drawn to, find something that you find yourself viscerally drawn towards, and then look at the colors there. So for me, it was the wallpaper that we used in the downstairs of our house, and it's in our kitchen and our dining room, and we pulled colors from that. So the dining room is green and the kitchen is green, the living room is kind of this deep blue, and it all came from that. And then as we build out the rest of the design, we'll be pulling little pops of red because there are little bits of red in the wallpaper, so we can use that because someone already did the work of coming up with that color palette, right? So if you're worried about getting color palettes right, let someone else do the work and choose something to pull your colors out of, because if they go together in the wallpaper, they'll go together in your house. So I love that strategy. I also think thinking about the environments where you feel really good. Is there a hotel where you feel really restored? A place you go on vacation? It could just be, if you love to go to the islands, then maybe, think about what are the colors of the palm trees and the sky and the buildings, can you pull those colors into your space? Because places you feel naturally good, when you pull those colors in, it will pull that energy in as well.
I love that. And that almost even seems kind of like a little bit of a mindfulness practice, a little bit more aware when you're in spaces. Can you share about that? I know that mindfulness is something that is a part of how you speak about design. And anyway, I'm going to pose the question to you.
Yeah. So I have a practice I call joy spotting. And joy spotting is basically, it is a kind of mindfulness practice, but it's specifically focused on noticing what brings you joy, what makes you feel good. And then, just being able to tune your attention to that in your surroundings. Anywhere you go, you can do it on a walk. You can do it, I know people who do it while taking their kids to school together. They do it together and they notice things that bring them joy. And I think that this is a really great kind of mind body practice, because you're really using your senses, and you're starting to build a connection between your senses and your emotions. We are so dissociated in modern life. We're so cut off from our bodies. And so I think, especially working in an environments that are bland and dry, we're basically trying to ignore our senses all the time. That's what we're told to do. We're told to tune out the information from our senses. So this is a process of tuning back into that information and seeing how it affects your emotions and your system.
Wow, seeing how it affects your emotions and your system. And again, like I'm really feeling the fun of this practice too,
It's
because
totally fun.
yeah.
It's totally fun, and it's easy, and it, in joyful I share 10 aesthetics of joy, and it can be really fun once you know them to start spotting them, because you'll notice, you'll have an experience and you'll be like, why do I feel so good? And then you'll be able to break it down, almost like having a secret code or a key, like a decoder ring, because you can see, oh, that's magic, or oh, that's energy. It's bright and colorful. That's why I feel that way. So you can start to break down joyful experiences into their different aesthetics. And that makes it even easier to translate that back into your space, because you
Whoa.
know which aesthetics are being stimulated. Like, for example, transcendence. Transcendence is the aesthetic of things that float and fly. We have a lot of attraction to things that float and fly, to looking up at cathedrals, to mobiles, to things that hang. And so if you have an experience in an amazing cathedral, let's say, and you're like, I feel so joyful. Why? And you understand that, oh, it's this sense of transcendence. You can start to do things to bring that, even if you don't have, a 30-foot high ceiling, you can do things that draw the eye up and that start to create that feeling. Or you can put up aerial photographs that look down, right? That give you that sense of perspective, of vastness that comes with transcendence. So there's immediate things you can do, like add color and plants and things like that. But then as you start to get more aware of the different aesthetics, you can start to add them in more nuanced and subtle ways.
Okay, you just blew my mind with that. Can you share with us about these 10 elements of joy? That was just so fascinating.
Sure. Let me back up and just explain how I got here. So after that original review, I started, asking people about the things and places that brought them joy. And I noticed that there were certain things that just kept coming up again and again and again. They were things like cherry blossoms and bubbles and swimming pools and tree houses and hot air balloons and rainbow sprinkles and googly eyes. And there were all these things that just seemed to be joyful the world over. They're universally joyful. And I started looking at them and thinking, why are these particular things so joyful? What is it about them? And I would start to move them around on my wall, just kind of like this kind of wall. And I would, I would move them around. And then I noticed that there were these patterns, these things that consistently seemed to bring joy. And they related to the physical attributes of these different objects. So round shapes is one I mentioned. I call that the aesthetic of play, because it brings out this playful feeling. Energy is color and light. Abundance is the aesthetic of kind of like the kid in the candy store. It feels like more, a sense of variety. So polka dots or confetti or rainbows, all of these things have a lot of color, a lot of sensation. Layering, those kinds of things create joy. You also see joy. I mentioned harmony. Freedom is the aesthetic of wild nature and open space. And so there are 10 of these different aesthetics, and those patterns, as I trace them back, for each pattern, I thought, well, why would it be the case that this would be universally joyful? And it turns out that for each one, there's an evolutionary reason. So, for example, with color, we're drawn to color because our color vision evolved in part to help our primate ancestors find ripe fruit in the treetop canopy, stand out against the background of, the green leaves. And so on a very primal level, when we see a bright pop of color, it's like a sign of energy or a sign of life. And that's something that even though we no longer are going to eat all of the colorful things in our surroundings, it taps into the same neurological circuit. So for each of these aesthetics of joy, we can understand why we would be drawn to those things. And from an evolutionary perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
And I just, this is so fascinating because what you're describing, okay, like freedom, transcendence, and then translating that into something you can kind of physically and intentionally add into your space is pretty wild.
Right, because they seem like very abstract values, right?
Right.
But if we understand that actually they have roots in the physical, we can understand how to translate them to our space.
You know, I'm really understanding more and more. I'm like, this is why we need the how. Okay. This is why we need the how. I'm like so blown away by this. Okay, so let's say, if someone's in a situation where maybe they're feeling kind of stuck, like what is there an element that they can bring into their home to kind of counterbalance that inner feeling?
Oh, that's a great question. So the aesthetic I would immediately go to for that is renewal, which is the last of the 10 aesthetics. It's the aesthetic of blossoming and growth and potential. It's the aesthetic that reminds us that there are seasons, that there's change. And so there are interesting ways, our homes are static. So renewal almost seems paradoxical. But one of the reasons that we're so drawn to flowers, for example, is that evolutionarily, they tell us where the fruit is going to be. So the reason the reason we love flowers so much is because it was evolutionarily advantageous for us to notice where the flowers were, because that way we could watch those particular bushes or those particular plants and get back there before the birds or the other animals ate all the fruit, right? So we could get some, and so it's a signal of change. And so I love flower shapes, anything sort of floral, anything that has that kind of the shape of growth, right? Those organic curves. You think of like a plant shoot sort of coming out of the ground with its little spirals. The spirals are another thing that suggests that sense of change and growth and things changing around us. And then, so floral motifs, floral patterns, also creating change in your environment. So, for example, reversible items, reversible rugs, reversible pillows, moving things around, moving your art around. So those are things that you can do that create that sense of renewal in the.
Oh my goodness. This is so amazing. So it also made me think, it's again, hard times in the world right now. I've heard people say even, oh gosh, I even feel guilty feeling joy because I know that other people are suffering and they don't even have access to this kind of moments that I'm able to access. So how about someone who, maybe they feel heavy and weighed down? Like what might they be able to bring in as a
So
balance?
this is one where I think I deal with this mindset a lot. I hear it a lot. This feeling of guilt about feeling joy, and I think that we have to address that through mindset. And the biggest thing there is the idea that it's not a zero sum game. So me having less joy doesn't give joy to anyone else.
Right.
And so it's really important to remember that when we take joy away from ourselves because we feel guilty that other people aren't able to experience it, we also deplete our resources to be able to do the things that we need to do so that they will actually be able to experience joy. So we can't help other people if we feel like we're in this constant state where we can't allow ourselves to feel any joy. So I think it's really important to decouple that and recognize that, I think we live in a society that is very scarcity minded. And so we're often taught that, like, if there's a winner, there has to be a loser. If there's someone who's feeling good, that means somewhere else is feeling bad. Those things are not connected. And so it's really important to decouple that and then start to take, small steps toward creating a space that feels good to you. And I don't know that there's a specific aesthetic for that particular
Sure.
situation, but it's more about thinking, what are the micro joys that I can allow myself to experience to build up my tolerance for it.
Build up my tolerance for it. Right. Because if with the small changes, then you start to feel it and then you can see how it's helpful. Then you can keep going a little bit further. So thank you for touching on that. What about someone who's like in a space where like, okay, I'm ready to manifest. I'm appreciating where I am. And, I also am wanting to call some more things in. Is there anything that comes to mind there?
I mean, maybe abundance would be a good aesthetic for this because, when I talk about abundance, I think it's really important to note that what I mean is sensorial abundance and not material abundance. So I'm not saying that you need a lot of stuff. I'm not saying that you need expensive stuff or a lot of wealth. What I'm talking about with abundance is this sense of kind of richness, sumptuousness that you get from layering, from texture, from variety. And so thinking about, what makes you feel sensorially satiated. It might also be a multisensory quality. So bringing in softness, bringing in sound and scent, those things might help you, create that feeling that you are already successful, that you were already that you've already achieved, a lot of things to be grateful for. Because obviously, that's the best energy to come from when you want to manifest something new. Is you want to come from the place where you already feel like you have the things you want. And the other thing I always say about like if you have something you want to manifest, I always think it's great to bring one tiny piece of that in full into your life. So, for example, before we really wanted to renovate our kitchen, but we couldn't do it at a particular moment. So we bought a faucet. We just changed the faucet, and we bought like our dream faucet. And so it was really funny, right? This kitchen that's like not at all our dream kitchen, but we have our dream faucet because every day when we go and look at that and turn it on and interact with it, we feel like we have this little piece of the dream. And then later we were able to do the kitchen and make it match. So is there one tiny piece of your dream that you can bring in that you're not settling, you're not compromising, but you've just done that one piece actually as you dream it?
That's so beautiful. And with the faucet, it's like you're constantly touching it. You're constantly
Yeah.
touching it. That's so cool. So you're like
Yes.
constantly interacting with it.
You're constantly interacting with your dream, with the realized state of your dream. So I always think, is there like one thing that represents the realized state of your dream that you can bring into your present? So you can be reminded of it everywhere you go, every time you're home.
That's so powerful. Is there one thing you can bring in that reminds you of the realized state of your dream? That gives me the chills. That is so good. And sensorially satiated, Ingrid,
Yeah, it's a
Mari,
mouthful. That's a
you are
mouthful.
no, no, no. You are really bringing it here. I mean, sensorily satiated. I haven't heard that, and I mean, I needed that phrase. Like, it has unlocked something for me that I'm like, oh yeah, okay. How can we do that? That so beautiful. Wow, this has been such a rich conversation. I really appreciate you bringing your knowledge and just wisdom and experience to us. This has just been such a unique kind of conversation. And so as we're in these last few minutes here, then what else would you like to share with our audience? Is there anything that we haven't brought in yet that you'd like to make sure we just like leave people with?
The one thing I would say is that I have noticed that our society has this belief that joy is kind of a luxury or a reward that we earn. And I think if there's one thing I want people to understand is that you are born deserving joy. Like you deserve joy because you exist, because joy is an evolutionary sign of thriving. It is a sign of flourishing. And everyone who is born, who exists on this planet, deserves to flourish, not just to survive, but to flourish. And so remembering that, you don't have to check everything off on your to-do list to be worthy of joy. You don't have to be the perfect daughter or partner or parent to deserve joy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be successful to deserve joy. You don't have to be where you think you're supposed to be in life to deserve joy. all of these things are things that kind of keep us chasing as opposed to enjoying, what is in front of us right now. And so practices like joy spotting, bringing joy into your home, are reminders that you are worthy of joy just as you are, and that it's an integral part of your humanity.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for offering us that. Joy is an integral part of your humanity. Thank you, Ingrid. And so, where can we learn more about you and your work?
You can find me at aestheticsofjoy.com. And you can find me at Ingrid Fattel on Instagram.
That's beautiful. And I'm just going to plug Ingrid a little more. I mean, on her website, she has totally fun quizzes, and she has so many resources on her website that are totally free, that are very, very fun to just look through. You're definitely going to have a takeaway from each and every blog post and everything she offers there. So make sure you go check it out. And thank you so much, Ingrid, again. It has been a joy.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy for me too. Thank you so much, Alexis.
Thanks.